Yes, sir.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. James Quintero, Texas Public Policy Foundation, here to testify in support of HB 565. The bill before the committee this afternoon seeks to do two important things. The first is to improve financial transparency, and the second is to foster a better decision-making environment for the public. Right now, when voters are asked to ratify a constitutional amendment, they may not fully understand the implications of their choice. This is because voters are provided with very little information about a measure at the point of decision-making, leaving many to guess about the near-term consequence. By integrating a cost estimate directly on the ballot, this bill ensures that voters are equipped with crucial information about how the amendment might impact the state's finances and, by extension, citizens' tax dollars. This is the type of good government change that we actually ought to consider for all fiscal measures. It's through the provision of this type of information that policymakers can encourage informed voting and allow citizens to weigh not only the ideological and practical merits of an amendment, but also its economic impact. So in the interest of adding value to our democratic process, instilling greater confidence in governance, and championing fiscal transparency, I urge you to pass HB 565. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Representative Rodriguez-Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Quintero.
Yes, ma'am.
In your opinion, so how would this look like, for example, a constitutional amendment that talks about disability, home exemption waivers or what have you for people with disabilities? So what would that look like, that we would show on a ballot if we were going to sign additional home exemptions for, let's say, veteran or whatever? I know we have something to that effect. What would that look like? So on the ballot, if we're going to be saying we want additional homestead exemptions for people with disabilities, it would cost the state $3 billion or whatever. That's what we're saying. We would let people know what it would cost the state by giving these people with disabilities homestead exemptions.
Yes, ma'am. That's my understanding, is there would be effectively a little box at the top that says, here's how much the all funds appropriation amount is for the biennium.
And so people will know, okay, I really don't want to help these people with disabilities because it's going to cost the state $3 billion that we're not going to be able. And so that's kind of what we're trying to get at, that we won't quite understand the benefits to our disability community, for example, because that's not what this allows for. It's just essentially the burden that it's going to take on the state in terms of the tax roll.
So I see it almost like a price tag. So when a consumer goes to a store to make a purchase, rarely do they pick up an item and not know how much that item is going to cost at the register. And so I think we're trying to take that principle and apply it to the voting booth so that voters are making an informed decision one way or the other.
Yeah, and so, but we don't know where would one get, because we want people to get, if we want full transparency, we want also know the benefits, right? Like also the cost, but also what are the benefits to what have you. So using the disability, it's going to cost us $3 billion, but that means it's going to reduce homelessness by whatever percent. Like, we won't know the full story if we don't include the benefits to this. So where would one get that information?
You know, for information of that nature, I think you'd probably have to rely on some future legislation to study what the actual effect of the passage of that amendment was, or rely on some sort of agency analysis.
Outside of what
But
this
at the
bill
point of
says.
decision-making, unfortunately, all that we have is what does this item cost?
Cost. Okay, all right, thank you, sir.
Ma'am?
Members, are there any other questions? Before I do that, though, the chair recognizes Representative Chox-Clair as being present. Representative Curry, you have
Just
a
for the
question.
record, every time I ask a question, somebody else comes in and gets
I know,
recognized to talk.
every time. It's like memento.
So I'm
in
going to
here.
keep doing this. Thank you for coming and testifying on this. And
Yes, sir.
I like the concept. I'm concerned. I've been definitely on the record about some of the fiscal notes that are out there. And I'm always concerned about the agencies trying to legislate with their fiscal notes.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily agree with some of them. And I'm going to use an example which I think is a very good example where I guess I'm not trying to open a box here, but it's going to be opened anyway. And that is in the example of dealing with a multi-billion-dollar note that's above and beyond the general revenue of the budget, right? where it's going to the voters for a constitutional amendment. And there's a fiscal note that the member disagrees with, as it could be exaggerated from the standpoint of there may be only $1 billion allocated to a particular item, but the fiscal note comes back saying it's going to be a $7 billion item when it's only going to be as much as is allowed by the legislature in the budget. How do you recommend dealing with something like that?
What a great question. And I've been in this game long enough to have seen a questionable fiscal note or two. I think you have to perhaps consider building in some sort of check and balance. Maybe it's interagency cooperation where the LBB and the Texas Controller are working together, and that there's some agreement necessary, or some other relevant agency that comes alongside LBB to help shore up and provide a firm number, because I think, to your point, we want to make sure that the cost estimate we're providing to the public is accurate and represents the true burden.
Okay, but again, I think that's not how I see the language of this bill reading, and I can deal with the author as well on this piece of it. I guess what I'm trying to get from you is how, and we can talk about how to do it. I mean, I think we're going to need to think that through a little better, because you could easily have a misleading number that's automatically stated that has to be in there that could be erroneous, or is disagreed upon by the author and the people that voted on the bill.
And I think that's a very fair point.
I don't know how to deal with that yet. I mean, honestly, I think that fiscal notes ought to be dozed. So I have my own opinion on this, but I do believe that somehow or another, because I want the transparency, I want the public to know. I totally respect Representative Rodriguez Ramos's comments about the benefit of things that are occurring as well. I think there's some difficult, in my mind, there's some difficult pieces to this, because the public is seeing one thing. And oftentimes, as you know, there's lots of things on a ballot in November that to be voted upon, and you can make it rather lengthy and they still don't understand it. And we want simplicity, we want transparency, we want a lot of things out of this. And I guess, you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about this subject. Does it need more thought? Does it need more definition?
I think with respect to the question that you raise, it's a very valid concern. Just spitballing here, one thing that maybe the bill author may consider, or perhaps this committee, prior to the adoption of a spending limit for the state, the LBB gathers together and they consider several different measures provided by various higher ed institutions as well as the Texas Controller. And maybe that's a formula that can be adopted here with respect to constitutional amendments, where the LBB has provided a range of different cost estimates for any given constitutional amendment, and then they select the measure that they feel best reflects reality, right? So that's perhaps one consideration. Happy to work with you on maybe getting a
Sounds
little
good.
closer to the bullseye, though.
Yeah, I think, and I'll talk to the author about this as well. I think this is something that we ought to take a little further, and certainly we should talk. I think we should discuss this further. But
One reason and this is a little bit outside the bounds, but one reason I hope to perfect this process is because in future legislative sessions, I think it would be prudent for policymakers to apply the standard that's developed here down to the local level. Because when you think about the local debt issue, that's really the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
And I agree with you totally. I think getting it right here the first time is critical, and there may be another process that needs to take place to do so. And I think that's something that we can discuss. But I appreciate your input on this and the discussion.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Thank you
Members-
for coming.
Members, are there any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Is there anyone else here